This is The Amazing Atheist.
And this is the infamous Halcyon.
Hello.
We're here to discuss Prometheus, Ridley Scott's new film. Prometheus is basically the story of scientists who are searching for the origins of mankind. They believe that we were bioengineered by a highly advanced race. Basically the theory of panspermia that you've seen tossed around here and there in academic circles, but you know, it's never really gained much traction.
But it's also like they help bioengineer us. Darwinian evolution still is there,
yeah.
But it's of course there. But we were helped along a little bit.
This particular species, the engineers, our creators, left markings all around the world in various civilizations in various time periods, indicating that we could find them at a particular configuration of stars and planets.
These are ancient civilizations that were separated by centuries, and yet this same pictogram was discovered in every one of them.
We basically go out seeking them, and as you can imagine, because this is a Ridley Scott movie and it's set in the same universe as Aliens, we don't exactly like what we find.
We'll take this as a book called Frozen in Time on the Franklin expeditions that looks at various scientific expeditions.
Yeah, there's, you know, the history of expedition, which inspired Lovecraft, which inspired Ridley Scott. You know, you look at some of these voyages that were undergone by Britain in the fucking 1800s to find the Northwest Passage, to reach the North Pole, and you look at the tremendous suffering of these people. I mean, they
had all these ambitions.
They go out there, they go with their ambitions, and they truly do make breathtaking discoveries, but they pay a tremendous price for doing so. And I think that that's definitely at play in this movie. You have people paying a tremendous price for their discoveries, and really, the real problem is not that they're going out there to discover, it's that they approach it with such naivete, and they just, there's a scene in the film where Noomi Rapace's character,
Elizabeth Shaw,
Elizabeth Shaw, you know, there's another crew member that's trying to bring a weapon along to investigate these alien ruins, and she's like, "No weapons, that's not needed. This is a scientific expedition." And he's like, "Well, good luck with that."
Yeah,
and you know,
and like everyone in the theater was chuckling, like, you know, there was like, this is a dangerous premonition. It's like in an old Star Wars film. I got a bad feeling about this.
Yeah, you know, let's go in unarmed.
But what really comes without suffering in life when anyone has made great travels in anything that we do?
Not even travels, but social progress, too.
Right, in all types of progress, yes. Neil deGrasse Tyson had said in a speech talking about the 1960s and what a turbulent decade it was. And not only in human progress socially. I mean, there was assassinations, so much violence, and there were assassinations. Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy and his brother and Robert F. Kennedy were assassinated, as well as many others in that decade. You know, it was unfathomable that we would even get to the moon. We didn't have the means to do all these things, and Kennedy made the declaration, and we actually accomplished it by then. And it took. There was a lot of adversity. There's been a lot of problems with spaceflight getting there, but they did it.
Ridley Scott, with this movie, is kind of thumbing his nose at that sort of naive belief that we can gain something without paying any sort of price.
Right. And that's the whole thing of the myth of Prometheus. It's like when we came to have fire, you know, it didn't come without a price, the one who had it.
Well, if I remember the myth correctly, Prometheus, the titan who gave mankind fire to begin with, ends up chained to a rock with vultures pecking at his flesh.
Yeah, and
every minute
he's
of every
immortal.
day.
It grows back, and they keep eating him out again.
And Zeus looked down upon mankind with fire, and he's like, "Where the fuck did they get fire? I'm going to destroy them." And he takes his lightning bolt, and then he looks down, and he's like, "You know what? I don't have to. They'll destroy themselves. They got fire now."
Well, Peter Weyland, who is the trillionaire who owns the Weyland Corporation, which in the later movies of this, which could become the Alien series.
Anyone who's familiar with the Alien
Movies.
series will know about the Weyland
Yeah,
Corporation.
which being Weyland-Yutani Corporation. And because in Ridley Scott's universe, it's really not about governments, it's about corporations that rule the future, which is all showcased in Blade Runner, which is very similar to the Alien universe, almost an indirect sequel.
Also showcased in our current reality.
Yes. The name of the ship is Prometheus, and Peter Weyland named it that after that god, the Titan, and what he went through for stealing. And this time now, we have harnessed the fire. We haven't destroyed ourselves, okay? And we have come back to face Zeus, basically. And Weyland wants to beat death itself and suffering of himself because he's now an elderly man.
What would you say is your favorite element of the movie? Not necessarily your favorite scene or story arc or anything like that, but just your favorite thematic element that was kind of a recurring thing throughout the movie, because there's a lot of things you could choose from.
It really gets down to, with me, is that there's a sense of wonder. There's always a sense of mystery. And in the movie Alien, and even Aliens, especially those two, and I think, and somewhat even Alien Resurrection, there's a sense of mystery that we find, and we find awe in that. And it penetrates us. We look outwardly, but we see inwardly. What the...
I was just making a little penetration joke.
Yeah,
Talking about things penetrating us. This is not a trumped up sort of horror. This is not the guy with the hockey mask is going to butcher you. This is a horror that was very grounded in these are the cold facts of the biology of the universe. This is a life form that you have come into conflict with. You have Elizabeth Shaw, who has...
an archaeologist who's of faith.
She has, faith in the Christian
And she also
religion.
has some stuff because her father was a missionary.
Yeah.
And then he died of disease.
And she has a very her story arc with religion throughout the movie is a very interesting one, because at the beginning she has just as the characters naively approach exploration, she naively approaches her faith. Towards the end of the movie, her approach to her faith is more a bedrock of her identity.
I wanted to say her character changes. She grows more than any other character in the film. I would say
she undergoes a pretty tremendous
through trauma that where you face adversity. There are certain people who will face adversity through these adventures, and some by chance will die. And I want to say there's always death. Like there's a price. Like in all the scientific expeditions, like. In the Franklin expedition.
In the doomed Franklin expedition, I mean, they paid a tremendous price for attempting to make those discoveries.
They had a massive amount for preparations they made in this Franklin expedition that goes back as inspiration for this, and talk about what they had prepared, how they did the food.
Well,
it went into later because I want to say this is important.
The thing with the Franklin expedition, and maybe it was the same naivete, but maybe it was also just coming from a position of ignorance, and you really can't blame them for their ignorance because they just didn't have any means of knowing any better. The Franklin expedition, which was an expedition that took place in the late 1800s, was basically doomed because they believed that their canned foods, such as their canned vegetables and meats, had anti-scorbutic properties. Anti-scorbutic, of course, means able to prevent scurvy, which means they have vitamin C.
Right.
But unfortunately, because of the preservation method, they didn't have anti-scorbutic properties.
Explain scurvy real quick.
Well, scurvy is basically vitamin C deficiency, and it leads to very debilitating effects where people are very weak and just very compromised. They have very little will to live. They become very depressed. There was another problem with the canned food, though. Not only did it not have any scorbutic properties, but it was canned poorly, so it was full of lead, which led to lead poisoning, which led to insanity. Which compromised the judgment of the crew.
Now, there was a lot of... They went looking, like, what happened to these people? And there was a great mystery. But they came across, there were some people who knew what happened to them. They were like, well, these were good English folk, from Great Britain. That they would not be acting in that manner. And what did they say happened to them?
Well, yeah, of course. The Inuits, who were native to the region that Britain was trying to explore, of course, saw what befell the Franklin expedition. They saw them in their last days resorting to murder and cannibalism.
Yeah.
And of course...
Not even just for means of doing it. They were just murdering and eating each other.
But the Britons, of course, didn't believe it. they thought that these were, the stories concocted by savages with overactive imaginations, but it is actually what happened.
Who is the savage?
Anthropologically, it was discovered that the Inuits were actually telling the truth, which should come as no surprise to any enlightened modern human being. But I want to talk a little bit more about the Elizabeth Shaw character arc in general, and all the other characters as well.
Yeah.
The thing that was interesting about Elizabeth Shaw is, you have the Nietzschean axiom that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's not always true. Sometimes
I felt there was
sometimes
a
what doesn't
arc in this film.
Yeah, but sometimes what doesn't kill you doesn't make you stronger. It actually makes you weaker. I mean, Nietzsche himself could maybe be categorized as that, as he did suffer a tremendous mental breakdown later in life. But it can make you stronger. And in this case, in the case of this character's arc, the trauma that she suffers actually does end up making her a stronger character.
And she's already come over adversity before, but I think she was a bit idealistic to feel secure. And there's a big thing about this in the psychology, is that we're so secure and protective and defensive of our systems. And we're also fearful that at some points, is that a detriment? Because we want to live forever. And do you accept death? There's the question of death itself that mankind faces. Are you willing to die? And the film ironically starts off in a way where it explains where this alien contact manipulated genetic history on Earth. Mm-hmm. And it shows there was a sacrifice made for willing to die for what they were willing to do, one of these alien humanoids. They were willing to just die. It was like, well, he did it. You watched him die. Basically, a very violent death.
Basically willing to suffer and die for the creation of mankind, which does have some parallels with...
the advancement of mankind, however you want to put it.
With Christian myth, or Christian fact, if you're a Christian, I guess.
Well, Christian mythological, cosmological,
right,
or whatever.
It does, and it does have some parallels to that. There's another interesting parallel in that the alien species that created us and was later seeking to destroy us for reasons that are never made fully clear in the film, they were attacked and wiped out 2,000 years ago.
At the time,
which is of course the time that Christ was supposed to be walking the earth.
And Shaw is always carrying a cross with her, and it's very important to her. Now she has what's his name? Charlie Holloway. She's with Charlie Holloway, which is her husband. It's not clearly said, but
husband or love interest towards the beginning.
Husband, lover, who's an archaeologist too and scientist. And now he is described very much as an atheist skeptic, but he's kind of a very, how to put it, he's willing to take risks that are really in an unscientific way. And he skips along because he's so giddy, and he's a skeptic, but he's also an idealist in a way connected with her.
And you didn't like his character very much.
I did not like his character. I thought he was an arrogant son of a bitch, and in a way, I came to respect him in the end. And because characters change in this movie when they're confronted with adversity, and then they find who they are. And that's the thing. It's not just that people die like in regular. I want to make a film. It's not like people just die in this film. They go through transformations before they're killed. There's something, you find out something about them is revealed in their death. You can make various turns, and life is so hard in this universe that you can make a wrong turn and you're going to be dead. Like, I have had very many wise friends in my own life, and then they go through, there's been a trauma, there's been something happen, and then I find out they're gone. It's like that, and I've seen a person killed before, and it can happen just like that. So when we look at movies and death, it's representational or reflective of something in our life.
One thing that this movie does is, it's not afraid to develop characters, to show you their humanity, to show you that they are actually rich and textured.
And challenge you with them.
And, well acted, well performed, well casted. And then, have them suffer horribly. Because what happens then is you realize that this is something that could happen to you or a family member. In
some way reflective in lives. It might not be, it's of course not with aliens.
You're probably not going to get mangled up by an alien, but
or some octopus creature.
Some nice person that and are friends with could have their head torn off by a fucking semi-truck or something.
I mean,
things like that happen. It's a world of random chance And that brutality is something that Ridley Scott really seeks to capture in this film, because that's really the true horror of our existence. And he uses aliens to partially explore that, and also to explore other philosophical things and other things that reflect the nature of life and existence and being. And it really is a horrific movie in a deeper and more philosophical sense. You're not really afraid of the aliens directly. It's not like, oh, I'm so scared of that particular alien thing because it's so creepy, although that might be one level of it. But what you're really scared of is just the brutality of the universe, which is a brutality that aliens
I think that's
or no
the real
aliens,
horror,
that exists
how
in our
tough
world.
it is. Because in a lot of films where they go off and it's like the crew's together and they're kind of like, yeah, we're going to go off and discover. It's Star Trek, right? Well, the thing about it is, like, they're together. In this crew, I think it shows a very separateness in the sociality, a division in the sociality between humans. Even on the crew, you could see that everyone has different objectives. And then they have an android who has completely different objectives as well.
Yeah. The characters really, their motives tear them apart. I mean, if this crew was unified with a single objective, you kind of get the feeling that maybe they would have fared a little better. These expeditions... a lot of these expeditions, the Franklin expedition was a doomed expedition, but a lot of expeditions,
doomed to hell.
Yeah, a lot of expeditions that went to the North Pole, or tried to get to the North Pole, or tried to find the Northwest Passage. A lot of them actually, considering the circumstances that they suffered, it's amazing the number of people that survived and were actually able to return home. And part of the reason was they were unified. They all deferred to their commanders. Commanders were usually assigned to their positions because of their competency. Here you have a lot of people that have varying agendas. Information is not flowing freely between the leadership and the people that are expected to follow it. There's a lot of problems here. There's a lot of dissent. There's a lot of objectives that are actually in conflict with one another.